Hello! So today is the day that I make my very first book review thing. Now, the book that I have chosen is one that a lot of you have probably read. It has been out for about 8 years, and I am very sad that I didn't know about this book when it came out because I was actually pretty close to the age of the protagonist. It is The Lightning Thief by Riordan, the first in the Percy Jackson series. I had heard so much about this series. Just for a warning, I am going to be talking about things that happen in the book, and if you have not read it, I recommend stopping at a certain point. I'll let you know when that is. I want to actually talk about it. I don't want to just give you a review because I think that's kind of boring. But if you haven't read it, Percy Jackson is a 12-year-old kid who has been kicked out of like 6 boarding schools by the time he's in the 7th grade. He learns that he is half human, half god, like Greek god. He just, he has to go on this quest, and it's all fun and games, except sometimes not. I recommend it to most people, unless you're just a cold, soulless, no fun booty head that just can't comprehend children and you think things are childish. You're wrong, but maybe you should just pick it up. I don't know. Now we're gonna go into the territory that could be uncharted for the people who have not read this, so I recommend reading it and maybe watching this later or something. I don't know. Or just watch it, and maybe you can get a loose idea of the book and then you won't have to read it, or don't do that. So like I said, Percy Jackson is a 12-year-old boy. It starts out with him on a school field trip at an art museum in New York City. He gets attacked by one of his teachers who turns out to be one of the Furies. If we remember from Hercules or Greek mythology, but I paid more attention to Hercules than Greek mythology, those are those 3 little old women with the little strings, I think, and I think that's who it is. Is that the same thing? I'm pretty sure it's the same thing, but they snip those little threads when it's time for you to go. And she's this winged creature, and she's just like, ah! And he kills her because, as we know, gods and monsters and things like that can't actually be killed permanently, so he gets her to go away for a while with his sword that Chiron throws at him, and he's like, whoa, what is this pin? This pin is also a sword. How ridiculous is this? His mom is like, well, we're gonna go to the beach. We're gonna make this better. It's gonna be okay, whatever. So they go to Montauk, and they're at Montauk, and it's just a storm, and then Grover comes to rescue or warn Percy and his mother. They take off, and Percy's mom is like, we gotta take you to this camp, I'm never gonna see you again. I know it's really sad, but like, you really don't have a choice because this monster is after you. And he's like, no, mom, no. And she's like, don't listen to me. You may be half God, but you are still a child. You have to do what I say, and I'm sorry, I love you, but you have to go. And so he's like, okay, fine. And so they're in the car, and they're driving, and this huge Minotaur, it's back there. They're almost at the camp, they can see the camp, kills the Minotaur right after the Minotaur kills his mother, and it's all very dramatic, and he wakes up, he's in Camp Half-Blood. And so he learns about, the fact that he's a demigod and all this other stuff, and he's like, whoa, wow, well that kind of explains all the weird crap that's happened in my life. Very reminiscent of the Potter, when he's like, oh, so that's why I could turn random people's hair colors and I ended up on the roof. Percy's like, oh, that's why weird crap always happens to me and I get kicked out of school. I'm sitting here thinking, Percy is probably going to be the son of Zeus, because that's the cliche thing for him to be. But then I started thinking, the second book is called The Sea of Monsters. There's another book called The Titan's Curse. These things are ocean related. He's probably Poseidon's son. And then I was right. So he enjoys Camp Half-Blood, and eventually he is given a quest because Zeus's bolt has been stolen, and he's gonna go retrieve it from the underworld. It takes a long time. They have like 20-something days, and they're making good time, and it's all good. I mean, some weird stuff happens. That dog turns into that giant monster and almost kills him. Then they get to Las Vegas. Now, I thought that the Lotus Casino was a really interesting, like, kind of funny metaphor for the entire city of Las Vegas, or at least like the casino area of Las Vegas. I was in Las Vegas like 3 weeks ago, and we were walking through the casinos, we were walking around, and you just don't have the same same concept of time. The sun goes down, but it's still really brightly lit. And then when you're inside the casinos, it's super bright. You know, they're pumping oxygen in there so you don't feel like any time is passing. And they do this so people stay up all night playing the slots. And it's like the same thing, how like they're playing all these games and they're getting like super addicted to the games. And there's people in there, you know, that haven't aged. They've been in there for like decades. And he's like, okay, something's up. And they figure it out, and they've been there for 5 days. They finally get to Santa Monica, which is where the entrance to Hades is. One of the things I really like in books is when I have been to the setting and I have experienced the location and I'm familiar with it, so it's really easy for me to picture. The thought of that nice little boardwalk being the entrance to Hades, that's just funny. It's just great, you know? And they come to the entrance and that guy is like, yeah, I'm not letting you through. And they try to bribe him with money. And I don't know, I just thought the whole thing was so funny because he's like, yeah, I need a pay raise. You know how difficult this job is? On the topic of paying, they were talking about how you have to pay when you're dead to get into the underworld. Like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So they get into Hades and they're going in the boat and the river is just like full of all this stuff, and you know, they're like, what's all this crap in the river? And the guard or whatever, whoever's driving the boat is like, oh, you know, it's really littered. It's all the hopes and dreams and wishes of mortals. It's like, oh my gosh, that is so depressing, but so funny because even your non-concrete thoughts have an afterlife of sorts. How nice. And then when they get down to the underworld, the entrance to the underworld, there's 3 lines. Back when I wasn't paying attention in Greek mythology, and I really didn't understand this in Hercules, I didn't understand that Hades was not hell and Mount Olympus was not heaven. Hades is for everybody, but it's divided into sections. The Asphodel I thought was really interesting because it's the people who don't want to be judged, or they haven't had any strong, you know, good or bad, so they're just kind of neutral. But when they described it, it was like, imagine standing in a Kansas wheat field for all of eternity. That doesn't sound that bad because I kind of pictured it being like, you know, maybe boring but peaceful, but turns out it's kind of crappy and you end up forgetting your life, and it kind of just sounds like you turn into like a robot or just like a vacant body. So that doesn't sound too good. And then you have the Fields of Punishment and Elysium. And Field of Punishment is obviously the punishment place, and Elysium is, you know, the happy place where they have rainbow grass and barbecue, apparently, because what else? I mean, what else would there be in heaven? You know, barbecue. One part of the whole, like, underworld experience that I thought was really interesting was when the pastor that is going through the lines or whatever and getting judged. You know, he's getting judged for the Fields of Punishment because he's evil or whatever. And Percy asked the question to Grover, he's like, well, what if they believe in a different kind of hell? And I thought it was really interesting because Grover was like, well, humans will see whatever they want. It's all part of that mist, the fact that humans don't see, you know, gods, they don't see the enemies, they don't see like all these things that happen. And then there's the Isles of Blessed, which were the 3 little Bermuda-looking islands in the middle, and Percy was like, I want to go there, because that's for, like, you know, the people who've been reincarnated 3 times, they've been Elysium every single time they've died, and they get to go to this special place, and I don't know, I feel like there's so few people there that it would be really secluded, and I would just feel really, like, excluded from everybody else. I feel like I would much rather it be you get to go to Elysium, but you have access to the islands. Who knows? Maybe the islands, maybe we'll learn more about that in the rest of the series. So then we meet Hades, and Hades, you know, I picture Hades as having, you know, the blue hair, the flamey hair, and the long robe, and just kind of gross looking. The way he describes Hades in here, he kind of reminds me of like an ancient Egyptian. I pictured him with, like, you know, a cropped haircut, kind of like the Cleopatra style. Likewise, when we're talking about the way the gods look, and they described Zeus as he was wearing a suit or whatever, and then they described Poseidon as someone who had on like Tommy Bahama and was sitting in like a fishing chair. My first thought was, that sounds like my dad. Maybe I'm the son of Poseidon or daughter of Poseidon or something. So anyway, turns out that Percy's been deceived, that he actually has the bolt in his backpack because Ares planted it there. Hades wants his helm returned. He's like, I don't even know what that is. They go back to the surface, they find Ares. Ares is like, haha, I tricked you. Percy conquers Ares, and then he throws the helm back into the ocean. It goes down to Hades. He goes up to Olympus. He returns returns the bolt to Zeus. He meets his dad. It's nice, but it's not too overly sentimental, which I really appreciated. And then Percy goes home to his mother, who has been spared because the helm was returned. And then Percy's mom, they get a gift from Olympus, and Percy's mom turns Gabe into a statue and sells him, which I thought was a great ending to that. Anyway, I'm currently reading The Sea of Monsters. I'll talk about that in the next one. I'm really glad that you have watched this whole thing because I'm sure it's very long. Thank you so much. I will talk to you at another time in the next few days probably. Okay, I'm leaving. I hope you enjoyed this, and bye. Whew, I just held my breath through that whole thing. Like I said before, I just spilled water all over the floor. I was trying to be so careful, and look at the pain that I experienced.